Welcome everyone. From Niti Aayog, on behalf of Niti Aayog, thank you for being here. I think this is a very pertinent topic. But before we get into the discussion, normally when we talk about blockchain, we really talk about it in a jargonized way. We have all kinds of tokens, nodes, acyclic graphs, but what is it really? I think let's, in this enterprise discussion, focus on the fact that it's, as Mr. Kant spoke about earlier, a tool to enable the collaboration and ease of collaboration between businesses. And on that note, I think, let me start with Mr. Kempen. We were just discussing right now, how in Netherlands, right, and broadly in Europe, Mr. Kempen, who heads IBM, blockchain for IBM in Europe broadly, and he in his we were just talking about how there are parallels between the work that IBM does there in terms of the logistics supply chain between countries for automotives. That's what I had heard in Netherlands, and how that can bring in ease of collaboration between not just businesses, but adding the layer of regulators, right, and adding the automotive registrar, the person doing the buying and selling. Can you please talk a little bit more about that? What is it that you do? That was the most interesting speech that I'd heard at the Netherlands conference, BIC 2018.
Okay, thank you very much. And also thank you very much for the opportunity to invite me here in this great conference, very well organized and really packed. So I'm leading the supply chain practice on blockchain technology for IBM in the Netherlands and Europe. Personally, I deliver an automotive blockchain platform. As IBM, we like to build things, but as IBM, we also know how to interact with enterprise and government. So as an example, we are building this automotive supply chain blockchain-based platform in Europe, where, let's say, the transportation of cars cross-border is really a complex matter. So many companies are involved, like customs, like fiscal authorities on VAT, cross-border elements. Also on the organization who register cars. Also the dealers and the OEMs, the car manufacturers. So when many companies are involved in a transaction, then blockchain technology can be a good thing. Not only because you have transparency of information, you also have the ability to have a smart contract on top of your blockchain platform to execute automatic business processes. So no manual labor is involved anymore. So all these entities are involved in cross-border transportation for cars. And on top of cars, in the cars, there will be IoT devices. With these IoT devices, you can have easily car wallets embedded in your car, with car sharing made much more easy. So many use cases for using blockchain technology, at least for doing easy business, cross-border, using blockchain technology for supply chain solutions.
I've been remiss. Let me introduce my distinguished panel. We were actually just getting to know each other for tea break, and then they called us all the way back. So, Franz he leads, as I said, blockchain for IBM in Europe. Sriram is a partner at PwC, and he's working with us at Niti Aayog as well on a lot of POCs, including the one with GNFC on fertilizers. Hari works with British Telecom, and as part of the CSR, they have been looking at various use cases in Karnataka. And Ravi, of course, looks after the technology stack at InMobi, and it'll be interesting to learn about the work that we're all doing. But I thought, let's explore a few themes, right? Because across these enterprise use cases, sometimes you have the problem of actually choosing what is it that actually is amenable to blockchain, what is it that is not. Because it's a space that is quite populated with a variety of use cases, some of which lend themselves to blockchain, some of which can even be done through a centralized system. So I think when we look at what really brings in the power of blockchain, I think as a group, as a community, we can move forward much faster. We can really drill ourselves into the use cases that matter and add value by disintermediating, or by making it simpler to access interfaces, or by making it easier to communicate between corporations, things other than price, right? And this parable that I often refer to, that Milton Friedman made popular actually. He talks about how even when you make a pencil, right, you have to have collaboration between so many different entities. You need to get wood from somewhere. You have to mine graphite. That process of mining graphite is so complicated. There's a machine for that. You need iron for that machine. And he wonders, how does this magic of collaboration happen? And he answers that it's about price, right? It's about the signal that price brings. But there are disagreements to that. When you actually transfer value between organizations, people may say, I did not get what I paid for. And usually the way to solve for that is to have someone come in, a trusted authority, and say, I'll sort of after the fact, I will come in and I'll tell you which person is right. And I think blockchain really is powerful because it brings in a technical way of doing it. So, Sriram, I know PwC also has a framework, but if you step out of your PwC had a bit, and you personally, how do you think we should go about looking at which use cases are actually, useful, which are not really amenable to blockchain?
So thanks, Abhishek. Thanks, Alec. Very interesting question. To me, blockchain is about solving two fundamental problems. The first fundamental problem of establishing trust between a set of people. Can you establish trust without an intermediary? So if there is a particular use case where there's an intermediary in between who is trying to play the role of a party who can establish trust, then that particular use case is amenable for blockchain. Point number one. Point number two, as people say, blockchain is all about doing to transactions what internet did to information. So for transactions to happen, there has to be a business network. So blockchain, if there is a two-party conversation or a two-party transaction, that typically is not a use case for blockchain. So you definitely need to have a network of participation. So first I talked about trust, second I talked about network. The third is an interesting concept. Is there anything of value that changes hands between the participants of the network? So if there is a thing of value that changes hands amongst the participants of a network, and through that particular process, there is value addition or there is value deletion, how can you exactly capture it in a way that every single participant in the network can understand it and make sense of it? So these are the top three lenses that I would look at when I am defining if a use case is amenable for blockchain or not.
Thank you, Sriram. That's very useful. I'll now turn to Ravi. How is InMobi thinking about this technology, and where does it see its value as Sriram just talked about? Sorry. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so if you think about ad ecosystem, InMobi is I think I'll talk about my industry, and then we can actually also talk about applications in other industries, and blockchain as a technology is why I am excited, right, from a distributed ledger standpoint. So if you look at mobile ad ecosystem, mobile being present in your pocket, it basically enables you to finally target a user, right? It knows everything about the user, so you're able to finally target a user. But what ends up happening is, this is the quintessential example of, like trillions of transactions happening, trillions of ads being shown on a daily basis globally. But it has to be done through an ecosystem. There cannot be a central authority arbitrating all of this. Whether it is Google, Facebook, even garden wall ecosystem from a network standpoint, needs to depend on, like, whether it is advertiser on one end, user on the other end, who is interacting through a publisher property. There are lots of businesses like us in the middle, ad technology providers like network, exchanges, tracking partners, and so on and whatnot. Two fundamental problem happens here, because this is like, I'm equally optimistic about blockchain application in logistics or any ecosystem which requires like a lot of multi-hop. But my industry, because it's digital native, it is a quintessential example of at-scale potential application of blockchain to prevent two things, right? One is fraud. Given these many players are involved and everything is programmatic, it can easily be frauded, right? That is one example. Second is, because to prevent fraud, there are lots of third-party ecosystem, third-party providers come up, whether it is trackers and and so on and so on. They are all actually value destruction, value leakage in the ecosystem, right? Finally, the end user service becomes costlier. So technology like us makes it possible for freemium as a construct for B2C, right? If you are playing a game or an app without actually purchasing it, I think it's only made possible because of the monetization that is provided by ad-supported industry, right? In that, not having a distributed trust framework is a quintessential reason why it's expensive for the publisher and then it gets passed on to the advertiser, which gets like, essentially like a mediocre service, or the value can actually be added to the end user service if you think about it. So if I look at it, I think in this context, like, we have, to answer your question, what we are thinking about, we have a patent. If you look at blockchain as a technology today, it is still, from a throughput standpoint, it is still at a pretty infant stage. It's rapidly evolving, but to support like billions of transactions, let alone a trillion, I think it's quite a bit of a stretch where the technology is today. So I think this is the reason why,
That's a good point. And since you're here, Mr. Kempen, I'd like to put you on the spot. There's a large debate in the community about the scalability and the utility, of public blockchains versus permission ledgers, right? And I know IBM has a Hyperledger protocol, on which a lot of transactions are being done. But for the benefit of the audience, could you also talk about, I'm sure a lot of them know about blockchain and about permission ledgers and about public ledgers and the differences. But how do you see this technology evolving over time in the next 5 to 10 years as governments become more sensitized to, let's say, public blockchains around the world? Do you think enterprise blockchains will have any value left at all?
That's a very good question. The question is about selecting, as an enterprise or a government, to select between, are you entering or developing an open blockchain platform or a permissioned blockchain platform? You cannot hear me. I hope the audience can hear me.
There's a lot of echo. It's quite tough to actually hear what anyone is saying.
Yeah, so the point is about selecting, developing an open blockchain platform or a permissioned platform. As IBM, we developed and implement IT solutions for enterprises, right? So we know how to approach enterprise and what is really key for them. For an enterprise to enter a blockchain platform, they want to know what legal entities they're doing business with. So an open blockchain platform, you never know who will download your code and who will run a node, so who will be part of your blockchain platform. Anybody can download the code on an open blockchain platform. As an enterprise company, where your entire business is dependent on the blockchain, for instance, on supply chain, you do not want anybody in the world, hackers, malicious actors, whatever, to enter your blockchain network, right? You want to know the legal entity of your blockchain participants in order that if something goes wrong or you have a dispute, you can bring it to court and bring it to justice, right, as a punishment. So as IBM, we believe in a permission blockchain platform where a company or a government will invite business ecosystem partners joining the enterprise blockchain platform as a permission platform. Anybody can join that platform once it's agreed by the consensus of the participants in your platform. So you all know the legal entity of the participants of your network. The advantage of that is that it's a closed system, you know the participants, so the consensus protocol, so how do you agree consensus on the state? The consensus protocol is much more lighter than an open platform. For instance, on Bitcoin. Anybody can join the Bitcoin platform, right? So that's why the consensus protocol on Bitcoin is very heavy. You need to do proof of work. And we all know the disadvantage of proof of work.
And of course, IBM, of course, is implementing it, they're developing it, the blockchain technology, right? But broadly, it's interesting to look at companies which you would not typically think of as being interested in blockchain. Like, for example, I heard some time back that Google has been investing in some blockchain projects for some time, and that was very surprising to me because it seems that the power of decentralization versus what Google does, it doesn't, and Google does a lot of good work, but it doesn't, it doesn't sit in the same space. But I'll turn to I'll turn to Hari. He's from British Telecom, and you're doing these CSR projects. So clearly there's interest and there's belief from British Telecom side as well on the premise of this technology. What is that belief, and why do you want to do any CSR activities through blockchain? Why not go and donate to let's say children who are going hungry, or to other causes that CSR companies usually donate to?
So let me tell you what blockchain is doing to BT and to the telecom industry itself. Yeah. The first big thing it does is it sets up an ecosystem of trust between all the stakeholders. The second big thing is it drives down cost and improves the operational efficiency. And third, through both of above, it also brings in customer experience transformation, right? So one of the things that we have done in the mainstream is around how we send out customer premise equipments to our customers, right? Currently, we don't have a great way of doing supply chain management. It is not tamper-proof. It is not immutable. And that's the reason we're going to a blockchain. And the business problem it tackles...
Moving your supply chain on blockchain? Or
that's correct, yeah. And the problem it addresses for us is we send out twice as many number of routers that are required, just because we don't have immutability and traceability. And this is plugging that for us. And let me also give you a very good example of where it makes a massive difference, blockchain as a technology. One of the big reasons for churn in the telco industry for an end customer is a poor billing experience. If you have a poor billing experience, you're not incentivized to be with your incumbent provider. And moving it onto a blockchain with a smart contract sitting on top of it between the user and the network provider is a foolproof way of making sure your bill is not impacted, right? And you get what you're actually using for. Yeah. And that, I believe, is going to be driving up customer experience as well.
What is interesting is that in all of these supply chain use cases, right, unlike a technology like AI or any other disruptive technology where there's a change in your top line, as soon as you implement it, there is efficiencies. Here, it's a foundational layer, as I think all of us talked about. But, and this is a question that I would want to take home back to, my superiors at Niti Aayog as well. Where does the industry see a viable role of the government, right? And, rather than us talking about it from the government side, I would like to hear from each one of you because, is there any value we can add in terms of helping to form consortiums? Because I see a lot of POCs. We see in India, in Netherlands, but how do we make these POCs full-time large projects where citizens are actually using blockchain platforms, and it goes beyond PPTs and goes beyond demos in boardrooms to people actually using it? Okay. Franz, and then we can go, I think, with...
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it's some echo. I'll just do it offline. I'm sorry for you guys.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, I had a question. So the role of government in enabling blockchain technology in a country, right?
And moving from POCs to projects. Is there any value in terms of government helping inform consortiums, right, of multiple players, which is when the real value of blockchain will come in, when you get all these government entities, all these corporates on the same platform?
Exactly. So the question is, how can the government have a role in enabling and stimulating the build of blockchain technology in a country, right? So in the Netherlands we have, and in Europe also in each of the countries, we have a blockchain coalition. And the blockchain coalition is formed by government entities and large enterprises.
I really like that model. Could you talk about it some more?
So in this blockchain coalition, I'm a part of that coalition on behalf of IBM. So in this coalition, we define also common standards. The common standards on the blockchain protocol and on data models is really key. Because in the future, you will get the internet of blockchains. So these blockchains need to communicate together, be able. So as a government entity, you need to define standards. Also, within a government, there are several entities who are important for enterprises. Like I mentioned, the fiscal organization, the car registration organization, the customs organizations, and there are many other organizations in a government organization who are key for enterprises to build a consortium. All these enterprises in a company, in a government, needs to support the blockchain model. Because if, as an enterprise, you would like to start your blockchain network, always government entities are involved. So all these entities need to have the right mindset that they get support from central government to support the initiative of a business consortium in enabling blockchain technology. Many times in the past, an enterprise company goes to a government organization, and the government organization says, well, it's just far too away, it's long, etc. They're delaying the process of innovation of enterprises. So from a central organization, government, it would be good to stimulate the absorption cycle of enterprises and government organizations. This is what we try to do at the IBM, of the Blockchain Consortium Initiative in the Netherlands.
So 2 questions. I think the first question is what can governments do, and second, how can we move from POC pilots into production? On the first question, you know, a lot of people are doing a lot of blockchain projects on a lot of areas. Where do they converge? For example, we talk about land records blockchain. We talk about rentals blockchain for residences. We talk about blockchain for tourist spaces. Now, somehow all of these are connected. Think of a scenario where a land record blockchain is on protocol 1 and a rental blockchain is on protocol 2 and they don't talk to each other. Is there a role that government can play upfront in terms of defining specific blockchain use cases end to end, which would allow the industry to thrive and flourish? So that is one area where government can look at. Mr. Kempens talked about the standards and the other areas that government can definitely look at. No doubt about it. The second question is, how do you move from pilots and POCs into production? The answer to that particular question is not in technology. Technology is the easiest problem that can be solved when you want to move from POCs and pilots into production. Is there a role that government or anybody else or industry bodies can play to bring the network together? Can somebody play a role in terms of defining certain protocols or governance mechanisms in terms of memberships, in terms of enrollment, in terms of funding for blockchain? For example, by definition, blockchain is a network of parties coming together. Who has to fund what? Yeah. During production, how do you ensure that it's accounted for properly? Yeah. Is there specific approaches towards it? So the whole aspect of adoption from a non-technology business aspect is something that has to be really taken care of and brought into cognizance upfront if you really want to scale towards production, apart from the technology problem.
We are also struggling with that exact issue. You can fund POCs, but how do you fund protocols? And how do you do it as government? Because it becomes doubly complicated then, because government has its own rules around how you can spend money. Is it a viability gap funding model? How do you get people together, and how do you pay for the initial layer? So I don't know if there's value in comparing that to, let's say, the roads of a city, the trunk infrastructure of a city, which government pays for, and then private sector builds on top and adds value. But I'll let the panel continue, and I've been told that we need to wrap this up, so then we'll open it up for any questions, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, to your question, Alak, on what the government can play. The government can play a force multiplier in all of this. If you look at the advantage of blockchain as a technology, it is about being a disintermediary. It drives down the cost of operations. It makes it easily available and democratizes the government services as well. The government's role can particularly be about how they can get in and incentivize more and more end users to come onto it. And that is not only going to drive a network and a platform effect in itself, which is going to be a force multiplier in better adoption and driving down cost of service. And that is something that we also saw when we were discussing as part of an initiative which we took on our own steam with the Karnataka government on how they could look at land record management being moved onto a blockchain, right? Having said that, I think where we are right now in terms of adoption of this technology is still, we are only seeing the early green shoots. Particularly, the biggest challenge that we have with land record management is around how legacy behemoth records can be moved, digitized and moved. Cleaned before they get moved, right? So those are the big challenges. And those are not particularly relevant to blockchain as a technology, but then that's really where the government has a very big role
I think,
to play.
for example, Telangana, we just learned, cleaning up 96% of their existing land records is quite an achievement. I think that's something that has to be done before any state government moves its land records to blockchain.
Absolutely.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think as I began touched on, right? As technology stands today, it may be in the evolutionary stage. But even during this stage, I think there are creative reference architecture solution you can come up with, even to the scale at which that even ad industry works, if you think about it. Between the construct of what is kept private as a private ledger, as a public ledger, what is actually static, relatively static registry, what is dynamically changing. So the dynamically changing one, in terms of like rapidly mutating records, if you will, transactions, if you will, that is where if you do it at a large scale today, as the blockchain technology as it exists, doesn't really scale today. But if you are able to find a way, say for example, in my ecosystem, if I put consumer at the center of it and have a ad vault, which is a private blockchain sitting within the mobile, within your point of presence, and have every other actor, which is an agent, it takes an agent model, whether it is advertiser or publisher, but they are interacting with your private blockchain sitting within the device. That basically, suddenly, the billions of transactions are broken down to billions of small private registries. And that is where the records are mutating at the few transactions a second velocity, not at the millions of transactions a second velocity to begin with. So there are creative ways in which that we can approach, rather than just be cynical to Fran's point about like whether the technology would scale or not. Definitely, like that's still at the nascent stage, but there are creative ways we can approach, like we are trying.
Can you talk about one or two of those ways, and then because that's a very interesting point.
And the second thing that I would, this technology would require is both government support in terms of just what Telangana government has done in terms of launching and harboring, whatever ecosystem to kind of get the startup and entrepreneurs going. That is one. Second, standardization, right? Whether it is government induced, like what Roy is working on in terms of making things more distributed trust sort of a thing, or what GDPR did in Europe, etc., or industry-led standardization. Right, supply chain should come up with its own standardization, financial, SWIFT, like the protocols came in the, in the yesteryear years. They can be modernized, and with help of government and regulators, and those are all the combination that I can think of where the blockchain technology can actually deliver to the full potential.
Yeah, thank you. That is a very pertinent point. I think let's look at how scalability evolves. Let's open up the floor to questions. And please take advantage of the experts sitting here, everyone except me. Ask them questions and go ahead.
Questions? Sure. Yeah, can we take a couple of questions before we break?
Please identify who you're asking the question to, so it's easier for us to.
And can we switch on the hand mics, please? Can we switch on all the hand mics? Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, gentlemen. It's not a question. I'd like to give some information. I'm Padmanabhaya, Director from STQC, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. Since you mentioned about standardization in blockchain technology, a lot of it is going on from the government side. Right now, there is an Indian delegation participating in ISO committees, an international organization for standardization. It is Technical Committee 307. We are we are involved in a number of standards which are under development, although none of them have fully been finalized. Parallelly, Indian Standards Organization, that is Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS, is also having sectional committees and working groups for developing blockchain standards. Similar to what is happening in ISO. I am also a member of both these committees, and I would request all the experts in blockchain to send their suggestions or any concerns or issues so that we can think of considering them for developing in Indian standards or even putting them in international standards. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Yes, just
We have one question.
One
Yes.
question here. I thought blockchain would be very useful for the GST network that we have. Has the government thought of using blockchain for GST so that the individuals don't have to worry about filing returns? All the data is there and you can do that
No,
yourself.
that's a great question. Franz and I just before this we were discussing how his work, in Europe as of now, he's looking at the automotive supply chain and also at how the components of the supply chain can be transferred between borders in a seamless way with the least paperwork possible. And in GST as well, we have made enormous strides. It's simplified logistics considerably. How can we take the next step? Because I think there are parallels to intra-EU movement, and obviously intrastate movement here. So Franz, if you could speak to that. And GST basically is our goods and services tax. It was launched. It's a unified tax regime across the country. And sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So indeed, in EU, we are one continent, of course, but there are many regulations in each of the countries. And cross-border is really key in Europe. So we need to make a process system where all the countries and the entities in a country can easily do business together. So there are different VAT rules in each of the countries. A blockchain can be you cannot change these VAT rules. These countries have their own rules and you cannot change it. So that's a given. Now you need to find a solution where you create a blockchain platform with a smart contract on top of it, that each of the entities in each of the countries, like a fiscal organization in Germany, with a customs in Germany, with a car registration organization in Germany, can easily communicate with the fiscal organization in the Netherlands, with the car registration organization in the Netherlands, and the customs in the Netherlands. They have a common understanding of the data, a common blockchain protocol, common transparency, so that it can easily have a visibility on the supply chain. So there can be no misunderstanding of the information on a car or anything else. So it's about transparency and visibility on the state. On top of that, the government should play a role in terms of encouraging. The government cannot impose standards. And that's a key point. The standards will come from the blockchain protocol. Like you have Enterprise Ethereum blockchain protocol, you have Hyperledger protocol, any protocols which are open source community. There are many hundreds of developers building that open source blockchain protocols. A government cannot do this. Because if you define a blockchain platform for a specific country, you always are late because you do not have the development power as in an open source blockchain platform worldwide. There are many more developers worldwide. So you always are lagging behind in terms of technology and in terms of security, which makes you very vulnerable. So keep the standards globally, select a good platform which you find comfortable with, then enable your organizations as a government in the country to support enterprises who will lead the road to a blockchain adoption.
I have a follow-up question actually, because it's a very interesting topic. Is this on? Okay, so how did you start? So when you have this protocol between governments, right, it'll only work if all of them are online, right? So how many entities did you start with? How did you pilot it? And then I think Sriram has been working on this as well, so I would like you to also take a crack at this question.
Yes, this is a question about how to start a blockchain project.
Particularly this one, with government entities involved.
Sorry?
Particularly this one, with different government certifying entities involved.
So if you start a consortium on a proof of concept phase with many parties involved, it will be a failure. You need to start with a very, very limited number of entities. 2, 3, maximum 4. Because as you mentioned really, the governance model is a very important topic and a very hard topic. I always compare, let's say, building a blockchain network with an iceberg. You know, the iceberg, 10% is above the surface, 90% is below the surface. The 10% above the surface is building a smart contract, building a user interface, discussing, let's say, blockchain use cases. That's 10% of the complexity. 90% is below the water, which is 2 parts. One is technology. It's running an IT project. It's integrating with your legacy systems. It's integrating with the data models of your consortium partners. The second element, what you mentioned, is the governance model amongst the business partners who runs this blockchain platform. So what is your governance model? Who decides who can enter? What is your business process, etc.? So this is 90% of the work. It's a hard IT project. I'm implementing now myself an automotive platform in Europe. Going from POC to production is really hard. Going to your question and finalizing this. So 2, 3 maximum number of companies starting an entity, doing a proof of concept, moving towards an MVP. MVP is minimal viable product. Then slowly after 1 year, half year, moving to adopting more companies on your network, slowly. And aligning them on the governance model, aligning them on their protocol, aligning them on the integration with the IT systems. Going very small to growing very, very, very big. Do not start with a big consortium. Smart, very small, and make quick, iterative steps.
Very practical. Thank you.
I will try to answer this question in a very pointed manner. Am I audible?
Can we just increase the volume of the mic there? Yeah.
I'll try to answer this in a very pointed manner. In terms of GST question that you asked, can blockchain play a role in GST? When goods move from point A to B to C to D, there is value addition that's happening, and the tax regime, what we call as GST, is coming into picture. So prima facie, this looks like a fantastic blockchain use case where you build transparency into the system. However, like all pragmatic technocrats, we always preach that let's not put a solution to a problem that does not potentially exist. We already have a solution in terms of a GST and IT solution. Let's look for ways by which blockchain can add value on top of it and not revamp the existing solution. So where can it add value? 2 or 3 areas that comes to mind up front. First is the GST certificate that is being produced and being used for multiple aspects. Can that be made tamper-proof? Can that be made authentic? Can the certificates be put on blockchain and access be given to other people? The latest regulation on e-way bill, which has to be provided with the transportation ecosystem, and there are multiple cases of people trying to subvert the system by saying that a particular truck was in Hyderabad today, Guwahati tomorrow, and in Trivandrum day after tomorrow. So is there a way by which this whole e-way bill can be put on blockchain to make sure that the transparency can be brought on top of it? So there are certain specific use cases that can be brought on top of GST and specifically for blockchain. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriram. I think with that, I'd like to thank all my fellow panelists who brought a lot into this discussion. These are all technology leaders in their fields, working in enterprises, working to build blockchain solutions and moving from POCs to projects. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and congratulations to Nucleus Vision, and thanks to government of Telangana as well for really pulling this together, bringing in so many individuals who are interested in blockchain.
So pleasure is entirely ours, and thank you to all our panelists. A huge round of applause for them, ladies and gentlemen.